Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is Kyle Whitmire, who needs no introduction. Kyle, welcome back to our show. It's a different dynamic for me and you to now talk in my front yard and your den.
Drastically since last time we did this.
Yeah, it's been a bit. It has been a bit. So what's been going on with you with respect to how you live your life as it currently exists with all the uncertainty that we're all living under?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'm that different than anybody else. I'm spending a lot of time at home. Every time I go to the grocery store, I feel like I'm walking through a burning building. Learning to not be alarmed when I see someone with a mask coming up to me. It's an adjustment, and I don't feel like I'm that different than most other folks right now. But it's hard for reporters and journalists because we're accustomed to I remember one editor when I was young told me that the key is just to get as close as you can in breaking news as quickly as you can, and then figure out what the story is once you get there. And now we're having to cover the biggest story of our lives from our living rooms and our basements and our sun porches. And that's just very different than what we're, and also hopefully I won't be interrupted, but with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old running around the house at the same time. So they're taking their nap right now.
Jimmy Fallon has given us a whole new perspective on being able to operate with children in our shows. So, the media has taken it a bit on the chin at times regarding...
And in other places.
Yes, regarding the reporting of the essential facts that the public wants to know, and everybody's confused, and we really don't know what to believe. One thing we know for certain is in excess of 70,000 people have died in this country, and a much larger number that I can't recall right now globally.
Right.
From a media perspective, how would you respond to those that accuse the media of being politically motivated in some way?
Well, I don't think there's any political motivation when people who want to call the media alarmist. I don't know that you can do that and ignore what we were seeing just a few weeks ago in New York, where they were literally stacking bodies in refrigerator trucks before this lockdowns, shelter in place, shelter at home ordinance, whatever you want to call it, really began to take effect, and we began to flatten the curve. This is a real thing. This is not flu. This is not anything that anybody should be trifling with. And I'm used to being a lightning rod because I believe it's part of our job to tell the truth and say things even when those are things that people aren't going to want to hear, and things that might make us unpopular. I can live with that. But this is not scare tactics. This is very real, and people should still take it seriously.
And in terms of our local, when I say local, I'm talking Birmingham proper, our mayor has indicated that we should all continue to stay at home as much as possible. And there is some loosening of that. I know that people it seemed to me that on Monday, oddly enough, just 4 days ago, people started to crack and go, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And regardless of the repercussion of that reaction, they started to get out and get about one another. The beaches opened up. What would you say to these people as a journalist in terms of the human responsibility that each and every individual has to every other individual in our society with respect to this?
Well, I mean, before I say anything as a journalist, I just say something as a person, which is, look, I feel the exact same way, and my wife and I are constantly looking for opportunities to, you know, sometimes we go to Red Mountain Park, we, sometimes go to Railroad Park, taking the precautions that we're supposed to. But everybody wants this to be over. Everybody is under this pressure, some more than others, obviously. This is a test of endurance. And, I think it has been a failure, especially for among public officials, all the way from, local level to the White House, to really explain to the public what a long-term test we're up against. All those projections that we've seen show this nice little neat little bell curve where you have no cases and then it goes up and then it comes back down. And what the experts have said is, those projections are somewhat deceptive, because what reality is going to look like is more like shark teeth, right? So instead of this nice little neat little curve, you're going to see a bump, and then you might see another bump, and then you'll see another one. And we're beginning to, that's what we're beginning to see. And when we see these infection rates beginning to go up, it's very easy to become discouraged and say, well, this isn't working, might as well go back to what we were doing, which I think is where a lot of people are at right now.
But we're not. Our advice to the audience would be, don't go that far just yet.
Yeah, well, I
So,
mean, here in Alabama, we have, for the first time, the benefit of waiting for Georgia to go first.
yeah,
Georgia has thrown open its doors pretty much wide open. I mean, even movie theaters and gyms and, restaurants and places where there's lots of close contact indoors, which seems to be where this thing moves from person to person. Um, we can wait a couple weeks and see what happens there. And if something bad happens, we can take a step back and say, we're not ready to go there yet. Or if nothing happens, if it doesn't seem to have any negative impact, then maybe we follow suit. But we have the benefit of, for the first time, of being maybe not last, but not first.
let's take a break and come back and get a little more specific with what's going on in Montgomery, not only with our legislative body, but also our governor. This is Our Issues Birmingham. I'm Tommy Spina with Kyle Whitmire. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham, talking with Kyle Whitmire, AL.com, among other things. War on Dumb, I like that name. There's a lot of that out there. And not to imply anything negative here, but what's your feeling and opinion about how our governor has dealt with this? She was criticized on the front end for seemingly to do nothing, and then she came out and did something. And she seems to be getting a grip on things. And I think for the most part, would probably get at least a B for her actions here.
Yeah, very early on, she was a bit unsure and sort of slow to act. But really in the last few weeks, she has shown a determination that a lot of other governors in our region have not. I mean, there's tremendous pressure on her right now, and on other public officials to take these restrictions off, to end the shelter in place ordinances and orders, and just let everybody go about their lives as though that's going to be a solution. I don't think it is. But she said, look, we're not going to set a date. We're going to look at data. We're going to listen to experts. We're going to take a scientific approach to this. And despite, all that pressure that's been on her to open things back up, she's been taking a slow and steady and safe approach. I expect maybe this week or next, we might hear whether or not we're going to open up barbershops, hair salons, maybe some restaurants under really tight conditions.
Speaking of Montgomery, this week, and we may not finish in this segment, but we can come back after break and finish up with it. There was a meeting scheduled called a session, a legislative session, that started Monday. And I used the term session very loosely. And you wrote a piece about it just a couple of days ago that was spot on to many people that I've spoken with that know that I'm interviewing with you today. Did you happen to be there?
No, I was covering it from remotely like everybody else. But I've talked to a lot of the people who are involved in bringing the legislature back, and there was a lot of reluctance on the part of a lot of lawmakers to come back this quickly because in Alabama, they're required to pass a budget. That's it. They can pass a budget and go home, but that process sometimes gets strung out over months and months, and you have to have special sessions, and it gets really messy. They could call a special session in September and finish up then if they wanted to. But Del Marsh and a few legislative leaders were very, very eager to come back in a very unusual way. And everybody sort of sensed that something didn't smell right. And I think this week we learned what that was.
What was it?
I didn't know if you wanted to go to your break first.
Let me ask you this because I'll come back to that question.
Okay.
Was it the odor of mendacity, to quote, I think it's Tennessee Williams? I could be wrong about that. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I am. But was the Gov involved in getting this session together on Monday?
No, she seemed pretty surprised that lawmakers were this eager to come back. And it was very specific leaders in the Senate. It was Del Marsh, it was Arthur Orr, and a few others who were pushing to come back. Speaker Mac McCutcheon, who himself has some underlying health issues. He's had open heart surgery and had very serious heart problems. Was not that eager to come back, did not want to come back, but agreed to, with the stipulation that they would only be passing budgets, they would only be addressing local bills that had already been entered, and a school bond deal. And that was going to be it, no new business. And that's not what happened.
All right, we're going to take the break, and then we're going to come back and discuss that smell. So
Okay.
Don't leave me, and keep the kids down for just a few more minutes. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm Tommy Spina, talking with Kyle Whitmire. We're discussing Montgomery, the pandemic, things that are going on, budgets, and this peculiar thing that happened this week in Montgomery when it came to our so-called legislative session. Kyle, you mentioned that something didn't smell right.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
So, well, first of all, as we said earlier, governor's been doing a pretty good job. No real interference from other branches of government until lawmakers have now come back. They didn't have to come back right now. They could have waited till later, but for some reason, Senator Del Marsh and Arthur Orr and others were really insistent that now was the time that they needed to be in Montgomery. House Speaker Mac McCutcheon did not want to come back, but they struck a deal that they were going to have a very narrow focus. They were only going to deal with budgets, local bills, and a school bond deal. Well, they get back in Montgomery, and suddenly new bills start to drop. They start to be, that's what when we say they file a bill, it's when someone sponsors a bill, we say the bill dropped. There was a bill to restrict the governor's powers to declare a state of emergency to 2 weeks. There is a bill to basically grant immunity to businesses and other incorporated entities to protect them from legal liability during the coronavirus pandemic. So if you are employer and you call your employees back to work and you put them into an unsafe situation and they get sick and something happens to them, then that company may not be responsible for that. Um, and also, like embedded in the budget now, this $1.8 billion that the federal government is giving to Alabama to help with coronavirus recovery. Um, the legislature now wants to be the ones to say where that money goes, and I think this is a moving target. But at the beginning of this week, at least, they were going to give Governor Kay Ivey about $100 million of that money, and $1.7 billion of that money was going to be theirs to apportion wherever it needed to be. And uh, so it's the legislature going back to its old tricks. Now, to his credit, Speaker Mac McCutcheon in the House was very angry that the Senate had not lived up to the bargain that they made, the deal that they made, that they were going to have a narrow focus and not start bringing up new stuff. And he has said that the House will not consider any of this stuff that's coming its way. So hopefully that's going to get resolved. But it's just, once again, our whole world has changed in ways that many of us couldn't imagine. But gosh, the Alabama legislature is just acting like the same old thing it's always been.
Like there's this big chunk of money coming.
Yeah.
How can we apportion it to our benefit?
It's
versus
power
what it was
plays, it's
intended for?
backstabbing, it's pork politics. It's if we had to have a constant in the world right now, I'm not sure I'd want this to be it, but it is.
When you said he was angry, did he scream?
He's not a screamer. He walked down to the podium in the House when they were in session, which is not something the speaker usually sort of sits up on a dais, which is like it's like in a
Up
courtroom.
high,
It's like sitting
like
behind a judge sitting behind the bench. But he walked down to the podium in what we call the well, which is just the floor of the House, and gave a little speech there that said, "Listen, guys, I know you're hearing a lot of stuff, a lot of rumors about things coming out of the Senate, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to do what we promised to do. We're going to live up to our end of this bargain, and we're going to insist that other people live up to theirs." And so he was, I that is as stern as he gets, but he was not happy. I mean, he's only done that maybe one, I know of one occasion, maybe twice since he's been Speaker of the House, as he stepped down to the podium to sort of have we call it a family meeting of the House members.
Well, when I tried to ask this question earlier, I think the delay in the remote recording caused it not to get answered. But what was going on there bipartisan? Was everybody on board?
Well, no, I mean,
going
left
in
this part completely out. The House Democrats have decided that this session is like, there's no reason for them to be there. Like, they get run slap over when they are present, and they have really serious concerns about this session, and they've left. Now, there are Democrats in the Senate that have shown up for work, and there's one Democratic House member in the House that's there. But this fight that we're seeing is it's not a partisan fight. It's a fight within the GOP. It's a fight within between the the GOP's House members and the Senate.
Any closing comments before we end our show about the Supreme Court affirming the Hubbard conviction in part?
Wow, that seems like a really long time ago right now.
Well, it has been.
Well, it only took, what, 4 years for that appeal to run its course.
Justice sometimes moves very slow.
I hope that
Keep it brief.
Public officials pay attention. It was not a clean case. I mean, some of the charges were overturned, or some of the counts were overturned, but enough were upheld that Mike Hubbard is going to have to go to prison. And the one thing about that decision that I hope that public officials pay attention to is that effectively what it did was it says the public official, in this case Mike Hubbard, they have exposure, they have legal exposure. You can get in trouble if you ask for favors or take favors from special interests. But the special interest and what that we call principals, which are people who employ lobbyists, they now have a little bit of protection, and so they in in federal bribery cases, it always takes two, right? You have to have a briber and a bribee. But if you're a public official right now in Alabama in the state law, you can get in trouble. If you're the person doing favors for that public official, you probably won't. So, I would say it should be a word of caution to public officials that the people who are trying to do favors for you might be the ones that are sending you to jail in the end, and they won't be there with you.
Thanks for being with us today, Kyle. I
Thank
appreciate you
you, John.
taking the time out of your day. Thank your children for
I
being
will.
quiet. And I apologize for the bird that whistles. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Stay home, stay safe, and remember to be particularly cautious in this horrible time that we're trying to get through. We'll see you next week.